The thought of losing everything, of watching his father's legacy turn to dust, consumed him. He was a poor farmer with nothing left but this land, yet it felt as though it had already slipped through his fingers. Then came the unexpected phone call, a CEO from a nearby corporation, a man whose wealth and influence were enough to change anything he touched. Leo had heard of him, seen his face on billboards, but never imagined their worlds would collide. The CEO, Daniel Grant, needed the land to build a new project, a deal that would make or break his company's future. But in a twist of fate, he offered Leo a lifeline, hire him to work the land, and in exchange, he would save the farm from being sold. As the contract was signed, Leo felt the sting of humiliation, his pride bruised. But survival, he knew, required sacrifices. He had no choice but to accept. What he didn't know was that this man, this wealthy CEO, would change his life in ways he never imagined. At first, Daniel saw Leo as just another cog in the machine, a means to an end. But as they worked side by side, something unexpected began to happen. Daniel, who had built his empire on control and ruthlessness, found himself learning lessons in humility, compassion, and resilience. And Leo, who had once believed the world was out to break him, discovered that even in the darkest times, a small act of kindness could restore more than just a piece of land. It could restore a soul. Leo's life had been marked by struggle, but also by an unshakable innocence, a belief that good things could still happen despite all the hardship. His humble existence had taught him to appreciate the simple joys: the smell of freshly plowed earth, the sound of birdsong at dawn, and the warmth of the sun on his face as he worked his fields. These small moments, rare as they were what kept him going. Yet his innocence was not just in his appreciation of nature, it lay in his unwavering faith in people, even in the face of adversity. When Daniel, the CEO, came into his life, Leo didn't approach him with suspicion or bitterness. Despite knowing that this man's wealth and power meant nothing to him, Leo believed that everyone had a purpose. Perhaps even someone like Daniel. He saw him not as a corporate giant, but as another human being caught in the same struggles of life. And so, when Daniel offered him a chance to save the land, Leo didn't question it. He saw it as an opportunity, not just for survival, but for redemption. In his eyes, Daniel was more than just a businessman. He was a person who, like everyone else, might need help. It was this innocence, this purity of spirit, that allowed Leo to forgive easily, to trust without hesitation, even when Daniel's intentions seemed unclear. As Leo worked alongside Daniel, the vulnerability in his demeanor shone through. Every time he looked at the land, his eyes would light up with a quiet hope, despite all that had been lost. It was this unwavering innocence in Leo's heart that tugged at Daniel, who, despite his corporate success, had forgotten what it was, like to truly believe in the goodness of others. The contrast between Leo's pure-hearted, almost childlike trust and Daniel's hardened, world-weary nature became painfully clear. Leo wasn't naive. He had seen loss and failure, but his heart remained open, untainted by the cynical world around him. It was this innocence that, over time, began to chip away at Daniel's walls, revealing something he had long buried: his own lost sense of humanity. As the weeks passed, the land began to show signs of life again. The hard work Leo and Daniel put into it slowly starting to pay off. But it wasn't just the crops that were thriving. Something deeper was shifting inside Daniel, something he hadn't expected. At first, he saw Leo as just a tool to help save the land, a simple, hard-working man he could push around and use to get what he needed. But as the days wore on, Daniel started to see the subtle changes in Leo. The way he smiled despite the struggles, the way his eyes still held a glimmer of hope, even when it seemed like the world was set against him. Leo never complained. He never asked for more than what he was given, and his gratitude was almost overwhelming to Daniel, who was used to dealing with people who were always demanding something in return. One evening, as they sat together after a long day of work, Leo shared a story from his childhood. He spoke of his father, how he had always taught him that true wealth was not found in money, but in the strength of character, in the ability to endure hardship with dignity, and in helping others without expecting anything in return. It was a story of sacrifice, humility, and love, and it struck a chord deep within Daniel. For the first time, Daniel realized how disconnected he had become from these simple truths. His success in the corporate world had come at the cost of his humanity. He had become numb to the world around him, focused only on profits and power. He had built an empire, but in the process, he had lost sight of the values that truly mattered, things like kindness, generosity, and the importance of family and community. Sitting there in the quiet of the field with the last rays of the setting sun casting a golden glow over the land, Daniel felt a stirring in his soul. He wasn't just saving a piece of land. He was being given a chance to save himself. In that moment, he understood. It wasn't about the deal, the money, or the project he had been chasing. It was about rediscovering the kind of person he had once been before the greed and ambition had taken over. He realized he had been living in a self-imposed prison, locked away in a world of numbers and targets, disconnected from the very things that made life meaningful. Leo had awakened something in him that he had forgotten existed, a moral compass, a sense of responsibility not just to his company but to the people and the world around him. It was a slow process, but Daniel started to change. He began to make decisions not just based on profit, but on what was best for the land, for the people who depended on it, and ultimately for himself. Daniel had thought he was saving the land. But in truth, the land had been saving him all along. It had taught him the value of patience, the power of kindness, and the importance of doing what was right, not what was easy. And through that, Daniel had found something more valuable than all his wealth, a renewed sense of purpose. It was a late afternoon, the kind where the air felt thick with anticipation. The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, casting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. The fields stretched out before them, a testament to the long, grueling days of work they had put in. Leo wiped the sweat from his brow, exhausted, but proud. The crops, which had once been on the brink of failure, were beginning to grow strong again. It was a victory, a small one, but one that mattered. Daniel, too, stood beside him, his arms crossed, watching the transformation before them. His mind was elsewhere, though. He had never expected to care so much about the land or about Leo. The CEO, so used to getting what he wanted with a click of a finger, was realizing that this simple man had something he lacked: purpose, a connection to the earth, and an unwavering belief in something greater than himself. Then, without warning, Leo turned to him, his voice quiet but full of emotion. "You know, this land, it's not just soil and crops to me. It's my family, my history. I'm not just working to survive. I'm working to honor everything my father taught me." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Daniel's heart clenched. He had never really thought about it that way. He had always seen the land as a business deal, as a transaction to save his company. He never understood that for Leo, it was everything. It was a part of him, a piece of his soul. Leo's eyes grew distant, as if he was looking at something far, beyond the horizon. When my father died, I promised him I'd keep this land alive. I've tried so hard, but sometimes it feels like I'm failing. His voice faltered, and for the first time, Daniel saw the vulnerability in him, the quiet desperation beneath the pride. Daniel didn't know how to respond at first. He was a man used to solving problems with money, with power, but what could he offer in this moment? His wealth couldn't fix the deep connection Leo had to this land, to his past. But as he stood there, looking at the man who had worked so tirelessly and so humbly, something within Daniel shifted. "I don't know how to fix everything," Daniel said softly, his voice carrying a weight that surprised even him. "But I'll help you, not as a CEO, but as someone who's learning what it means to care." The words were simple, but they struck a chord deep within Leo. He looked at Daniel, his eyes filled with gratitude, but also something else: hope. For the first time, Leo felt as though the land wasn't just his responsibility anymore. It wasn't just about saving his father's legacy. It was about something more, something that Daniel had unwittingly given him: the belief that he wasn't alone in this fight. In that moment, with the sunset casting a golden glow over them, a quiet understanding passed between them. It wasn't about money or status anymore. It was about the shared human experience, the struggles, the sacrifices, and the hope that even in the hardest of times, there could be redemption. As they stood there in silence watching the sky turn dark, Daniel felt a profound shift within himself. This was more than just a business deal. It was a journey of healing for both of them. The emotional weight of the moment was impossible to ignore, as Daniel realized that Leo's simple, unwavering dedication to his land had rekindled something in him, something that had been buried for years. And for Leo, it was the moment when he realized he wasn't just working to save the farm anymore. He was working to rebuild his own soul, with the unexpected help of a man who had once seemed so distant, but had now become a part of his journey. The air was thick with tension as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the field. Leo stood at the edge of the land, his gaze locked onto the horizon. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, the weight of the land's future pressing down on him. He had fought for this land, worked every inch of it with blood, sweat, and tears. But today, things felt different, more dangerous. There was a threat looming over them, something bigger than the land, bigger than the debts or struggles they had faced before. Daniel had made some enemies in the business world, and it seemed they were closing in. The news had reached Leo that someone ruthless, was looking to buy the land from under them, offering Daniel a huge sum of money to sell it off. The land, once a symbol of everything Leo had fought for, was now in jeopardy. Leo's heart raced as he thought of the promises he had made, to his father, to himself, and to the land that had sustained him and his family for generations. He wasn't about to let it slip away. Not now. Not after everything they had fought for. Without a word, he turned and marched back to where Daniel stood, his figure silhouetted against the fading light. Daniel had been on edge all day, his mind consumed by the pressure of the deal that loomed over them. But when he saw the determined look in Leo's eyes, he knew something had shifted. "Leo, I don't know how much longer we can hold on," Daniel said, his voice filled with frustration. "They're not going to stop. They'll do whatever it takes to force us out." Leo's eyes hardened. There was no hesitation in his voice as he replied, "I won't let them take it. I'll fight until the very end. This land belongs to me, to my family, and I'll protect it with everything I have." The determination in Leo's words was unmistakable. It wasn't just the land he was protecting. It was his pride, his history, and the legacy of those who had come before him. His resolve was unshakable, even in the face of adversity. Daniel, who had spent his life building his empire on business deals and strategic moves, saw something in Leo that he hadn't noticed before, an unrelenting spirit, a fierce devotion to the things that mattered most. The more he observed Leo, the more he realized that this man had something he had long lost, an unyielding commitment to his roots, to what he stood for. Leo's protectiveness wasn't just about the farm. It was about everything that had shaped him. Every person who had believed in him, and every piece of soil that had nourished his family. The thought of letting it go, of watching it all slip away, was something he couldn't bear. "I've seen how you fight for what you believe in," Daniel said, his voice softer now, tinged with respect. "But you don't have to do this alone. I'll stand by you. We'll fight this together." Leo's eyes softened for a moment, the weight of the situation momentarily lifting. He wasn't alone anymore. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was carrying the burden of the world on his shoulders. The two men stood together, side by side, facing the challenge ahead. There was no more room for doubt, no more room for fear. They would protect this land, this legacy, and whatever it took, they would face whatever came their way. Together. As the night fell, the wind began to pick up, swirling around them as though nature itself was rallying behind their resolve. In that moment, Leo felt the weight of the world lift, replaced by an unwavering determination to protect what mattered most. And with Daniel by his side, he knew they could overcome anything. Be me. Storm was closing in, the sky darkening with swirling clouds. Leo stood in the field, his fists clenched, staring at the horizon. The pressure of the land's future weighed heavily on him. Daniel stood beside him, silently grappling with his own doubts. The deal to sell the land was almost certain, and the men who wanted to buy it were ruthless. But Leo wasn't backing down. "The land's been through worse," Leo said, his voice steady. "I'm not giving up on it now." Suddenly, a truck appeared on the horizon, roaring towards them. The businessman, who had been pressuring Daniel for weeks, stepped out, his sharp suit contrasting with the stormy surroundings. "You don't have to keep fighting this," he said, smirking. "Just sign, and we'll make all your problems go away." Leo's eyes hardened. "This land isn't for sale. Not now, not ever." The businessman chuckled, clearly thinking Leo would relent. "You can't stop us. You'll regret this." Leo turned to Daniel. "This is who I am. I'll fight for it." Daniel hesitated, but as he looked at Leo's unwavering resolve, something clicked. He stepped forward. "You're right. This land belongs to him, and if you think you can take it from us, you'll have to go through both of us." The businessman stared at them, then snorted, climbing back into the truck. "You'll regret this," he muttered before driving off as the truck disappeared. The storm seemed to lift, the first light of dawn breaking through the clouds. For the first time, Leo felt hope. They had won this battle, but more challenges were ahead. Yet, standing together in the quiet aftermath, Leo and Daniel knew they had something stronger than any storm, a shared purpose. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the dissipating storm clouds, Leo stood in the middle of the field, taking a deep breath. The battle wasn't over. He knew that. But in that moment, something had shifted. The land was still his, still theirs, and the fight had rekindled a fire in him that had been burning low for too long. The storm had tested him, but now, with the clear sky above, he felt a sense of clarity he hadn't known in years. Daniel stood beside him, looking out at the field. For the first time, he understood what Leo had been fighting for all along. This wasn't just about land. It was about family, legacy, and the unspoken connection to something greater than oneself. "You were right," Daniel said softly, his voice filled with respect. "This is more than just a piece of earth." Leo nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "It's everything, and I'm not giving up on it." The storm had passed, but the journey ahead was uncertain. Yet standing there together, Leo realized something deeper. The land would always be with him, but the strength he had found in himself and the bond he had formed with Daniel would carry him through whatever came next. With the land secure, for now, Leo could face the future with hope, not just for the farm, but for the kind of life he wanted to build, a life where he didn't have to fight alone. The world seemed quieter now, the chaos of the storm replaced with a sense of peace. Leo looked out at the field once more, but this time he saw it differently. It was a place of new beginnings.